I say Worcester, the first thing that comes to your head is probably Americans poorly pronouncing Worcestershire sauce, which may be poorly pronounced by myself. You don't know how many takes that took. Second to that, the old rugby team, Worcester Warriors, and more on them later. And you may think of Worcester City's 2-1 win against Liverpool in the FA Cup third round in January of 1959. You may even think of a boiler company called Worcester. Now, the football club, Worcester City, have fallen on hard times since then. They lost their stadium, St George's Lane, in 2013, which had been the scene of that famous FA Cup upset in 1959 against Liverpool, which is considered one of the greatest upsets in the history of the FA Cup. They lost that stadium in 2013. The club's financial situation at that time wasn't great, and they ended up leaving the city for a period of time. However, there is another team in the city that, whilst doesn't have the longevity or history of Worcester City, does have a massive stadium considering the level of play that they are at. In fact, I'm sure a lot of League 2, League 1 clubs would be very jealous of their stadium. I'm talking about Worcester Raiders Football Club, which was formed back in 2001, back then primarily focused on youth football. However, since 2010 they have focused on senior football, but that's not the interesting thing about them. They currently play in the Hellenic League Premier Division, which is the 9th step on the English football pyramid. Despite this, they have a stadium with a capacity of just over 12,000. Why? Because they play at an old rugby ground called Sixways Stadium, which was the previous home of rugby club Worcester Warriors. How did this non-league club end up with a stadium of this size? And yet Worcester City Football Club are left to play in a tiny stadium by comparison called Canes Lane, which is the home of the Worcestershire FA. They do play at the same level, the Hellenic League Premier Division as well, but that stadium holds less than 2,000 spectators. Well, let's try and answer that question. So, the how of it, well, the club moved into Sixways in 2020, supported by the ownership of the rugby club, Worcester Warriors. They may have wanted to increase the use of the stadium outside of rugby. That's only a guess on my part, but this probably wasn't the way to go, because Worcester Warriors ended up having to be liquidated in 2013 with crippling debts. Now, we're no rugby fans, this is a football channel after all, but it seems good to mention that the rugby club feels like somewhat of a vanity project from the guy that created the Worcester Boiler Company, Cecil Duckworth, because before that point Worcester had never had a top-flight rugby team, let alone being considered a rugby county, Worcestershire, which seems like a major problem in rugby, that each club seems to be some vanity project where some rich guy that doesn't have an interest in football or wants to be seated in a more, let's say, middle class scenario wants a seat at the table. Back to the Raiders, because when Worcester Warriors went out of business, their stadium was seized, meaning the Worcester Raiders had no home. However, they came to an agreement with administrators to gain the use of this just over 12,000 capacity stadia. Remember, this club plays in the Hellenic League Premier Division alongside the true giants of the game, such as Highworth Town, Royal Wootton Bassett, and Brimscombe and Thrupp. Don't know who Brimscombe and Thrupp are? They're based in Stroud in Gloucestershire. They're a great little team. They also have a Worcester derby against Worcester City, who are, as mentioned previously, at the same level as them. Now, the title of the video is a little provocative, but it's a common football chant. Your ground's too big for you is a regular taunt for clubs with little fan support, and let's face it, it's mostly aimed at plastic clubs. MK Dons. For the massive venue the Raiders have, according to their own website, the 2022-23 season on average had an attendance of 311 on average in a just over 12,000 capacity stadium with all the modern facilities that you could want from an EFL club. That's a lot of empty seats. And they got just under 1,000 for an FA Cup preliminary round match last season as well. Now, we haven't been able to verify Worcester City's average attendance, but they have been given permission to build a new stadium at a seating capacity of apparently 565, which is also considerably smaller than Sixways. Now, whether the stadium gets used again for rugby is unknown. It probably will at some point. There are murmurings and plans in place. However, it is a nice stadium, and if somebody had a little bit of money and wanted to invest in non-league football, then maybe Worcester City or Worcester Raiders buy the stadium, try and push it into the EFL. The stadium is still too big for most League 2 and League 1 clubs, but should they, if they're in the Championship magically, then they'd probably be able to sell it out. It's all a bit of a white elephant, much like the Darlington Arena in Darlington. I just hope that Sixways just doesn't go the same way as other grounds like Neen Park, which found itself without a permanent tenant and ended up getting demolished. Maybe they could do what Mallorca does with its two clubs, because you've got Real Mallorca and you've got Atletico Baleares, who were once at the same level, and apparently the rule is that the biggest club gets, well, the club higher up in the footballing pyramid gets the use of what is currently Mallorca's home ground, as it's not actually owned by them. It's owned by the city of Las Palmas. I'm just going to pronounce it as the Estadio Mallorca because I'm going to butcher it because I'm English. But it'd be nice, maybe a Worcester derby to decide who gets Sixways. But it is a massive ground, and for Worcester Raiders, sorry to say, your ground's too big for you. If you like this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up as well, and hit the bell icon to be notified of all our latest videos. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to check out our website. It's deadair.media/sport for the latest football news. See you next time.